Hi everybody, Michael the Librarian of Magic here, finding and cataloging the magical and pointing you to it. I'm back with another What's New on Disney Plus video, this time for the week of February 14th, Valentine's Day, and just here to lay out everything new that was dropped to the service this week, as well as all the original content in a little bit of detail. And I got my notebook full of notes here, and I will jump straight away into it. Added to the service this week was the film Old Dogs from 2009, starring John Travolta and Robin Williams. Not a very good movie, but interesting. Kind of one of those so bad it's funny kind of movies, in my opinion. A movie called My Dog the Thief from 1969 was put on the service, a classic Disney movie. I have not seen it. I'll probably check it out at some point, but it's sort of in that classic era of live action Disney films, like in the same era as The Shaggy Dog or The Absent-Minded Professor, and so on. The film Splash from 1984 with Tom Hanks and Daryl Hannah. This one I've seen several times. It's a classic romantic comedy. And then the film Because of Winn-Dixie from 2005, starring Jeff Daniels, has also been added to the service. In original content this week, on Disney Family Sundays, the craft of the week was a Princess and the Frog lily pad, which I thought was something that was actually cool. It kind of gave me some ideas of things I could do to sort of make a similar craft or modify it. But basically, in the Disney Family Sundays version of it, they're making these like lily pad flowers out of old pistachio shells. They glue them onto like a circular piece of cardboard and then decorate them with green felt to mimic the lily pad leaves. And then they put the old shells in a flower configuration and then paint it to look like a flower. And it actually is really convincing looking flower, and I thought was a really cool way to repurpose pistachio shells. I'm always a big fan of finding cool, crafty ways to reuse things, and this is a really cool idea. They eventually use it to make like they put a hook on it, so you could hang it on a wall, like in a child's room or something, and hang something on it. But I suppose there are a lot of things you could do with it. You could make like a table centerpiece out of things like that for a child's birthday party, or just like even for something fancy. Or you could even use those as something cool for like a wedding, or a graduation or something like that. You could make table pieces out of them. I don't know. It was just kind of a cool, crafty idea, and it was fun to watch, and it seemed really easy and pretty cheap if you're already planning on eating pistachios for a snack. There's not much else you need to pull it off besides some, glue and paint and cardboard. So that was pretty neat this week, Disney Family Sundays. The Marvel Hero Project was an episode called Roving Robbie, and this one I found to be really cool. Robbie is a kid originally from Hawaii who is very passionate about our national parks and national monuments, and he has taken to visiting many of them after he heard about the recent plans to decrease the amount of acreage in some of the national monuments. He felt very strongly about that issue, and started traveling around the country to talk about protecting our public lands. And primarily, he has devoted his time to setting up a nonprofit to basically where he goes around to various elementary schools and stuff and gives talks just about the parks to encourage kids to know more about them and to care more about them, basically. And he uses VR technology to show virtual reality recordings of his visits to the various parks and monuments, which is really cool. And he's really just getting the word out about our public lands and inspiring young people, the future generations, to care about them, because that's how they're going to stick around. I personally really liked the episode. I'm a big National Parks fan myself, a National Parks geek. This is my National Parks passport. If you've never seen the passport program, you can get these at basically any visitor center in the National Park system. And it's basically a passport in which you can get stamps for visiting the various parks that you go to. Not that this short film is sponsored by the National Park Service or anything, or not that it's an advertisement for the passport program or anything like that. it's just something my wife and I like to do. We also care a lot about our national parks. We've gone to over 40 sites in the country. There are, if a lot of people might not know, there are over 418, 419 national park managed sites in the country. Most people are usually just familiar with the national parks, or what I call the capital NP national parks, which is, the big sites like Yellowstone or Yosemite or things like that, Grand Canyon. But the National Park Service is also in charge of managing all of our national monuments, national historic sites, battlefields, lake shores, seashores, national trails, national scenic riverways, national recreational areas like Lake Powell and Lake Mead. And so there are many, many units and many places that you can go to in our national park system that are all managed by the National Parks Service. So that's just not really like a plug for them or anything like that. It's just something that I happen to care a lot about, and so it was really cool to see in this episode that there are young people who are also being inspired by our public lands the way that I have in my life. I think it's something that happens pretty easily when you grow up in the western United States. I'm just very fortunate to live in Colorado, where we're pretty centrally located to a lot of the crown jewels in the national park system. I live, close enough to Rocky Mountain National Park that I could go pretty much whenever I want. I'm half a day's drive from Yellowstone and Grand Teton and the places in South Dakota like the Badlands and Jewel Cave, Wind Cave, and I'm also not that far of a drive realistically from the Grand Canyon and a lot of sites in New Mexico and Utah. So I have been to many. And that's why I've been able to bag so many. But I think it's just by virtue of the fact that you grow up so close to our public lands and the outdoors, which there are a lot of in the West, you are sort of born as like a person who cares a little bit about those places and the environment that surrounds them and so on, because you grow up going to those places for your education and your recreation and all of that stuff when you live out west. So anyway, that's just a short little thing. I didn't really intend for this to turn into a national parks rant, but that's something I care a lot about, and so I really enjoyed this episode. And there's a lot to learn about if you're interested in more of that stuff. There are so many resources and cool things you can learn. So if you are interested in any of that, I would encourage you to go check it out. So that was a Marvel Hero Project, which was a really cool episode. There was a new, well, not really new. So a couple of weeks ago, when Disney released all of the short animated films in their Short Circuit collection, there was one of the films was missing for some weird reason the day that they launched it, so I missed it on the day of launch. And I kind of noticed that the numbering system was off on that day, like for some weird reason. When you got to like videos 11 or like in the order of the series, it would be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When it got to like 11, it skipped to 13. And I was like, that's kind of weird. That's just a weird numbering error or something. But it turns out that they've like forgot to insert a whole short film into there. Or some weird technical thing happened, and I just didn't catch it on the day of release because it wasn't there when I reviewed them all. But it was when I went back and checked a second time, and it's a short film called Drop, which was a film about a raindrop, and it's just sort of about the adventures of a raindrop around the world, and kind of a cute, interesting rendition on the water cycle, and it uses some really clever, interesting, innovative animation techniques. So, and they, it's introduced by the director of the film, just like the rest are. So that was really cool. It wasn't the best, or it wasn't I wasn't my favorite or my least favorite of the collection, but I was glad that they finally figured out to put it in there to, be able to display the work of the people who worked on it. So that's Drop, which is now on the Short Circuit collection. And then in Diary of a Future President, there was an episode this week called The Whistleblower. I've really been enjoying this show quite a bit. This one picks up where the last one left off. Elena has ushered herself into womanhood. She's just had her first period, and the episode starts off with her mom having sort of a junk food, what she calls a time of the month foods, festival or whatever, where they just have like pizza and burgers and fries and cake and all kinds of junk, and they're just celebrating her, just she and her mom, and um, the her mom lets her in on what's going on with this case that she's been working on, which was kind of part of the plot of the last episode. We find out a little bit more about that. It's basically that this famous hotel chain or whatever, is mistreating all of their staff in terms of benefits and everything like that. They're taking advantage of these women that have immigrated from Cuba to work in these hotels, and she's taken to defending the workers to help them and help the hotel change their practices, and that gives Elena the idea of being proactive for causes and things like that. And she finds out in doing the big kind of thrust of the episode is she finds out in doing an essay project for school that the mascot of their school, which is based on like this guy who was the school founder, was kind of a bad dude. He was like an orange baron. This is a fictional guy, by the way, as far as I could gather. But he was like an orange baron in Florida who forced women laborers to wring oranges by hand, and they even go so far as to say that when he was involved in some sort of war battle, that he used a woman as a meat shield in front of him and stuff. And they just make him out to be a really terrible dude, and their school mascot is based on this guy. And so she becomes really alarmed by this. She wants to start an effort to change the school mascot, and she learns that these things take time, and even though you have a worthy cause, sometimes these things move slowly and frustratingly. She tries to go through the appropriate channels, and when she finds out that it's going to take a really long time to get anything to change, she sort of takes matters into her own hands, and she sets up a ambush to douse the school mascot, the person who's dressed in the school mascot costume during a tennis meet, with orange juice. To make her point, and it doesn't go well. She ends up getting detention. She doesn't actually even end up dousing the mascot. One of the cheerleaders gets held in front of the guy, and she gets doused with the orange juice, which is actually her former friend, who she's been kind of on the outs with for most of the episode. She ends up dousing her with orange juice. So, all of these things develop, and they have issues with each other, and they have a big confrontation after the orange juice incident, and so on. The mom's storyline is that she is, because she's been working closely with this her boss at the firm in dealing with this case. The boss is kind of getting a little too chummy, I guess you could say, and taking advantage of the fact that Gabby just wants to do whatever she can to keep her boss happy and keep herself on this case, but her boss is demanding more and more of her time for unwork related things like girl talk and to talk about her haircut and all kinds of stuff, and that's taking time away from her kids and family. And the thrust of her storyline in this episode is to try to figure out how to set a boundary with her boss. And then there's the storyline with Bobby, which this has kind of been a pattern in the show, that the three of them each have their own storyline. For Bobby, he is having a big tennis meet, which is where at the end it all kind of congeals together with Elena throwing orange juice on the mascot. At the tennis meet, he's having a showdown with one of the good players from some other school, and the kid gets in his head earlier in the show. It features how they get new jackets for the tennis team that have the players' names on the back, and Bobby has a history of them not getting his name right because they don't understand how to put the tilde over the N in his name, which is Cañero Reed, and he has all this like water bottles and all this stuff he's gotten over the years where it's like extremely wrong, and they just never get it right, and he's kind of given up hope that they'll ever get it right. But then when he gets his new captain's jacket, it's totally correct, and he's super happy about that and wearing his jacket. But then this other kid from the other school gets in his head by making fun of the tilde, and he starts calling it a worm, and he starts calling Bobby a worm, and that shakes him, and he has to try to figure out how to get over that during the match, and he gets some help from his teammates and encouragement from his teammates to do that. So that's what happens in this episode. It's funny as always, and it also has a point to it. So I've really been enjoying Diary of a Future President. It's a pretty fun little show. And then the final thing to really talk about is Disney released this week show on the original. You can find it on the original section of the site, or you can just search for it. But it's called Disney Fairy Tale Weddings. A couple of years ago, they sort of launched this as a special. They unveiled it as a couple-hour TV special on one of their on ABC, where they take some lucky couples and basically give them a dream wedding at one of the Disney parks, or they sometimes help people do super elaborate engagements and or vow renewals. They kind of find a bunch of people with interesting stories and basically hook them up with the wedding or engagement or whatever of a lifetime. And then after the popularity of the special, they did six episodes of a season worth of the concept, Disney Fairy Tale Weddings, on Freeform. And they just posted all of those this last Friday, just in time for Valentine's Day, onto Disney Plus. And also, in order to usher in a new season, Disney Fairy Tale Weddings now has a new home on Disney Plus, starting with season 2, and now they'll be unveiling an episode of that every week, starting with the first episode that they just released. So I went ahead and got caught up. I saw the special way back when, and didn't follow it when it hit Freeform, so I went ahead and caught back up on the whole first season. It's just 6 episodes. And there's an episode called Relationship Goals, just to give you an idea of what some of these are like. There's an episode called Relationship Goals in the beginning. They feature, usually each episode features 2 couples. This one features a couple who are big hockey fans, and they met playing hockey against each other, and now eventually play hockey on the same intergender team. So they're big hockey nuts and also big Disney fans. And they end up getting married at Epcot. And John, their names are John and Emily. The guy John, his family were big Disney nuts with him growing up. This is like his 30th time at the parks. And his family is also Chinese. So they get married at the China Pavilion at Epcot, and Disney goes all out for it. They bring in the acrobats that are normal performers in the park and all sorts of stuff like that, as well as the Chinese lion performers, and stuff like that. And then at their reception, they also bring the Stanley Cup, because these people are such hockey fans. And so that's a huge surprise for both of them, that waiting at their reception is the actual Stanley Cup, and everybody gets to hang out with it and take pictures. So that's sort of the gist of what it's like. And they show all of these weddings, and some of them have performers. There's one where these people sort of renew their vows, or they have a second ceremony because they had to elope because they had health reasons in the family and they didn't get to have the wedding that they wanted to have. So they go get married at Fort Wilderness at Walt Disney World. And the country star Hunter Hayes is there to perform for them because they're big country fans. So it's things like that. People get engaged on the Disney Cruise Line, and Disney goes all out to help them out with these engagements, these like super elaborate plans. One couple has Olivia Newton-John sing at their wedding. And so, yeah, and they're all different in their own way and super magical. Disney really goes all out and brings the magic. The cynical side of it all is that, Disney's not doing this out of the goodness of their hearts necessarily. This is like a big advertisement for people who do want to pay what I can only imagine to be a lot of money to do this for themselves. Disney is basically advertising that, hey, you can have your engagement here, you can have your wedding here. There's lots of they have wedding planners and all of that sort of stuff. So they are advertising for themselves by, footing the bill for a few people to hopefully encourage a bunch of other people to, have their wedding or engagement or vow renewals or whatever at Disney. But the non-cynical side of it all is Disney really does a great job. They really go all out, and some of the plans that they do are, if you're a softie or a romantic like me, you'll end up getting pretty misty-eyed in several of the episodes. There's great stories that these people are um, bringing to the table, and it's very interesting to see, people who love each other and love their families and all that stuff in these very magical, surprise-filled circumstances. And so, yeah, I did get misty in several of the episodes because there are some really good moments, especially when the people get surprised. I found myself being the biggest fan of the stories that involved the engagements, because the plans for those are so elaborate, and Disney really helps out and goes all out to help these engagements go off without a hitch, and they're really special and surprise filled, and yeah, it's just really neat. So then that's my general opinion of it. I watched those 6 episodes in which all these cool things happened, and then season 2, the first episode of the new season of Disney Fairy Tale Weddings is called Marching Down the Aisle, and it features 2 couples, Ciara and Daquan, and Megan and David. Ciara and Daquan are from the Midwest. Her family are really huge fans of Ohio State, the Buckeyes. And so when they get married at Disneyland, they're also, everybody is, of course, is a Disney fan that are involved in these shows. When they get married at Disneyland, they have all these great magical moments around the park with Mickey and so on. And then during their wedding, Disney gets the Ohio State marching band to come in and play during their ceremony, and that's really special for them, for their family. And then the other couple, it's an engagement story for David and Megan. They figure out how to get all of their families to the Aulani Resort in Hawaii, where David is planning on proposing to Megan, and she doesn't know that he's there. She thinks he's off on some work conference, but he's actually there to secretly propose to her, and it's very sweet to watch how they get it all involved. He gets himself in scuba gear and a tank with laminated cards, and gets her to snorkel over the top of him, and it's like super coordinated and super involved. This is the kind of stuff I'm talking about, where they really go all out to help out with it. So that was the new episode of the new season for Fairy Tale Weddings. It was, it's very touching and warm show. The first season, especially, the production of it is kind of corny at times. For me personally, the sort of payoff makes the corny setup of it, the production side of it, worth it. But I can imagine that being a turnoff for some people, because there's some of the more scripted, advertisial, if that's even a word, moments that are a little corny. But the production value goes up for season 2, I feel, because they're producing this exclusively for Disney Plus now. And I thought that the first episode of season 2 was better on the production side of things than any of the 6 episodes of season 1. But that being said, as I was trying to say before, just because some of the production side of things are a little corny here and there for me in the first season, I think that the stories of it and the romance of it, especially if you're looking for something to watch for Valentine's Day, or with your loved ones or whatever, it's a well-timed little treat. So if you want to see Disney just kind of go over the top with what they're capable of doing, the magic they're able to deliver for people in love, check out Disney Fairy Tale Weddings. It's a pretty fun little series, and they'll be releasing a new one every week as far as I can tell. So there should be a new one next week. So that brings me to the end of this video about kind of what occurred on Disney Plus this week, and I'll be back next week with another one. I'll be excited to see more Diary of a Future President and an interesting new episode of Fairy Tale Weddings. And what I'm really excited for coming this week is the first episode of the final season of The Clone Wars. We'll be premiering this coming Friday the 21st on Disney Plus. So I'm excited to do that, to see that. I'll probably give that series its own video series, just like I did with The Mandalorian, and I'm excited for that to be coming out. So if you are looking forward to any of those things, please join me next week when I start making content for all of that. As always, thanks for liking, commenting, and subscribing. I really appreciate it. I hope this has been entertaining and informative for you, and I will see you when I make the next one. Have a great week. Bye-bye.